Julia Miller is the 2025 Connecticut Teacher of the Year and 2024 New Haven Teacher of the Year. And she's a proud public schools teacher, parent, and alumna. A social studies teacher committed to anti-racist education and project-based learning. Her goal for her students is for them to become informed and active community members who feel empowered to make change. Entering her 18th year in the classroom, Miller teaches a 10th grade education course, 11th grade civics, and a 12th grade restorative justice law class at Metropolitan Business Academy. She received a Bachelor's of Arts from New York University's Gallaudet School, a Master's of Arts from Columbia University's Teachers College, and a 6-year certificate in educational leadership from Southern Connecticut State University. The conversation with Julia tonight is Babs Scholes, one of our favorite people. Babs is she's the editor-in-chief of the Inner City News. She is the personality and producer of Love Babs Love Talk Show on 103.5 WNNH LP Community Radio, which she catches up with interesting newsmakers in our greater New Haven area and beyond. And she is a nationally recognized blogger. I could go on and on. She also holds a BS Marketing from Barber Scotia College, which is a historically black college in Concord, North Carolina. She's a National Urban Fellow with a Master's in Public Administration from Baruch City University of New York, and a certified spiritual director from Mercy Center School of Spirituality and Practicum in Madison, Connecticut. She is on many, many boards here in New Haven, and with that, I'm going to turn this over.
Thank you, Margaret Ann. This is one of my favorite places to be in. I love this space. And I got to spend a little time in the Light of Truth exhibit Michael ran this evening. It was very contemplative. And in light of what the world is like, it was celebratory and sadness at the same time. And gives me hope for what could be, what is, and what could be for us. Let me tell you something, Julia. I love teachers. I come up from an age, because I'm old, you're not as old as I am. I come from an age where teachers were revered. Like if you had a teacher in your neighborhood, it was like having a police officer in the neighborhood, or a doctor or a lawyer in your neighborhood. So I grew up revering teachers when I was a kid. You know, my teachers were, the ones that turned me on to reading, and the ones that turned me on to civics, and the ones that sort of gave the world. So I have such reverence for teachers. And so when I look out into the world now, and I see teachers struggling to live somewhere, like I have teacher friends out there in Oakland who can't live in Oakland, who can't live in Oakland but teach in Oakland, have to live in San Jose and beyond. Do you know what I mean? When I look at other places where teachers are handcuffed about how they can give their kids an experience, I'm concerned. So the fact that I get to have a conversation with the New Haven Teacher of the Year for 2024, and then the Connecticut Teacher of the Year 2025, does that come with any money? Did I give you a big check?
A little travel. They pay for the travel.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're such a young woman, and please don't be insulted by that. You've been doing this for 18 years. You look you look barely out of high school yourself.
Well, I always like to have students guess how old I am because they guess younger. And then when they find out that I'm in my 40s, they're like, Miss, what? So thank you.
And then I found out the other night that her husband is Andrew from Broken Umbrella Theater, which I do some work with. So that was like a really freaky moment. Like, wow. I was like, oh, you have good taste. I really like you now. That household must be fun. So tell me, Julia, you grew up from New Haven. You're from New Haven.
Yep.
What was school like for you?
Do you know, I was literally just talking about this out there because there are some of my former peers, the parents are here. One of my former teachers is here in the audience, and we were all just talking about this. So I loved growing up in New Haven and going to New Haven Public Schools. I really feel like that is at the heart of who I am. So I went to West Hills in the 80s and 90s.
Oh, Lord.
And it was, I'm bad. And I can't tell you what a special place it was. It was the Bank Street model. You all can tell me if I'm wrong, Carlin especially. I want to say it was one of the earliest magnet schools, honestly, in the state. First, thank you, not earliest, first. And themes of diversity, parent involvement, there was integration across to all that we did, all of our classes, incredible arts programs. And it was just this magical place. And it was also not diverse in many ways, but integrated too. And I just thought that's what school was. And I like really hold my experiences, the 9 years that I spent there with me. And then I graduated 8th grade and I went to Wilbur-Cross. And I had a very different experience. And, you know, Cross, I have a lot of pride for my alma mater too, and they're doing some really incredible and important work right now in our city and deserves more resources and a lot of things. When I was there, as a white student, was in the minority in terms of the school population, but felt like I was just kind of automatically put in the honors track with all the other white kids. And so I had gone from this incredibly diverse, integrated space into a space that actually I felt like I took a step away, even though I was in the biggest high school in the city, in our diverse city. And I had incredible teachers there and great education. I also went to ECA and had incredible arts education, but I felt like I had these different opportunities than some of my peers. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, there's a tale of two New Havens, there's a tale of two Connecticuts, and I felt like I was experiencing that. And it's actually what really drove me to actually want to
ask you, when you were in high school, was that enough of a sense of I want to make a difference kind of and go to school and be a teacher? Was that the force?
It's where the spark was. I had this moment, I just remember very clearly, I was waiting to speak to my guidance counselor about, at the time it was called ISSP, but the Independent Study Program. I was taking a philosophy class at co-op, like I was doing all these other things, and there was a girl waiting with me, and she said, "What are you here for?" And I said, "Oh, ISSP." She said, "What's that?" No one had even told her. We were peers in the same school, that you could do these other programs. And it was really that moment, I was like, what? And that was where I first started thinking, well, maybe I want to do something to change this. Mm-hmm. And I was serious enough that I actually, I guess, applied and won this scholarship. It was a small scholarship, but for high school students who wanted to become teachers. I wasn't really sure, and I remember saying to my parents, like, but what if I don't become a teacher? Like, do I have to give the money back? No, and they're like, it's okay. But then, lo and behold, I did become a teacher. And it was when I graduated undergrad, I did a lot of arts education and creative dramatics, hence my, connection to my my theater husband. I always hung out with
always quite witty, I must say.
I always hung out with all the theater kids. I mean, I was a theater kid, but in college, even though I wasn't a theater kid, I still hung out with the theater kids. And so I thought after graduating college that maybe I wanted to do arts education and be in the nonprofit circuit. And I quickly said, you know what? If I really want to make a change, and I thought back to my own experience in New Haven, I was like, I got to be in the system. And at Gallatin, it's a school of individualized studies. You make up your own major. But I took a lot of American studies classes, primarily, especially. So it was a lot of history and politics and sociology and urban studies, all mixed together. And so I thought, well, I guess I could be a social studies teacher. And now here I am.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you're not just teaching civics. You're doing social justice work.
Yeah.
You're doing some real sort of work around this. How did you come to that? Because you could have just been a well-meaning white woman teaching kids and go home, but there's something else here that you are interested in, that you see the disparity in.
Yeah. Well, I will say some of my sense of the importance of activism in teaching, because I think those things can go hand in hand, really started, so I have taught in New Haven now a lot of years, but I started my teaching career in Brooklyn, New York. And I taught at there was a wave of, in New York City, of turning big schools into small co-located schools. So it was like the small school movement. And so my school was one of those. And so we were in the John Jay building, which was kind of like had a bad rap, like in the 70s, it was this kind of notorious place, and it had been turned into 3 small schools. And interestingly, the building is in the heart of Park Slope, which is a very white, affluent neighborhood, but it served not just predominantly, pretty much exclusively, students of color, lower income from other parts of Brooklyn. And there was a lot of tension in the neighborhood. The neighborhood did not treat our kids well. And they also didn't send their kids to our school. And so there were 3 schools in the building. And so there was this proposal for a 4th school to enter into the building. There was a school called Millennium in Manhattan, and they were going to make a sister school called Millennium Brooklyn and add it into our building in John Jay. And it was basically to send the Park Slope kids so that they would have a school to go to.
Wow. Separate and equal?
And so we fought against it, and my school really, we showed up, we went to meetings, we had protests outside, and we said that. We said, this is separate and unequal. We lost the battle, they came in, and our fears were realized. The floor that they were on was remodeled. This was an old building with a lot of problems. They had got air conditioners on their floor. We did not have air conditioners on our floor.
So this is really separate and equal. Because when I said separate and equal, I was like, well, they're going to be in the building, and they won't look very different than the rest of the schools, except all the white kids will go over here, and all the other kids will go over here. But they were really separate and unequal.
Yes, their bathrooms were redone. And so, but my school, rather than just saying, well, I guess we lost, and feeling defeated, our whole identity changed. And this was before people were talking about having the language of anti-racism. It's now more of, I think a known phrase, but this was pre that. But we really made it clear and wrote it into the mission statement to become an anti-racist school and pushing for integration. And so if you look up the school, you can read a lot about it. I won't go on a tangent, but Park Slope Collegiate actually really pushed there's been a huge movement in District 15 in Brooklyn, especially at the middle school. We were a 6th to 12th grade school. Into our middle, we pushed, and we got some parents in the neighborhood who were interested, and we started integrating the building and pushing, and there was a fight for our sports teams. So we had boys basketball and girls volleyball, and that was it. And Millennium came in, and because they were sister schools with the school in Manhattan, had 30 sports that their kids could do. And so we said, well, we should have that. And so anyway, it happened after I actually had moved to New Haven, but they were successful, and they merged all of their sports teams because they kept fighting. And so now our kids have access. Well, our kids, they're still always my kids, right? Even though I'm not there.
Teachers playing kids.
Have access to that, and it's changed the school's identity. So this was a long answer to say, my experience in Brooklyn, I really brought with me, and it made me think, schools can be a place of change.
So what made you come back to New Haven? Because you could have stayed there,
yeah,
right? I don't know.
Yeah.
What brought you back?
The short original answer is I had a baby, and New York is expensive to live in. But it was hard. We had a 2-year-old, and it was hard. But we still really wanted to live in a city, but just a city where we could have afford and have some more space. And we were thinking, well, should we move to Philly? Should we move to Providence? What are some other? And then it was like, oh, why are staring us in the face? Why don't we move to New Haven? New Haven, everyone who knows me knows I have a lot of New Haven pride. And New Haven is really what made me become an educator in the first place. So once that idea happened, it was oh yes, that feels right. Coming back to my hometown to teach, that made me who I am. It just felt so right. And now, almost 10 years later, I feel part of the community in a way that I didn't think was possible. Like, it's just such a special city.
Mm-hmm.
And I love our public schools, and so I'm so grateful to have come back here to teach.
I'm glad to hear that, because I think there's a couple of trains of thoughts about New Haven. I love New Haven. I'm a huge ambassador of New Haven. But I grew up in New Haven. I grew up, I started my life in Newhallville, lived in the Hill for my formative years. I went to Prince Street School and Gold Street School and Trowbridge School. I don't even think these schools exist anymore. And then I went to Eli Whitney, Votech School. But I have, my roots are deep in New Haven. So when I hear people talk about New Haven, I love that people are excited as I am about New Haven. So where you're teaching now, is that where you landed, or did you land somewhere else?
Yes, no, I did. So I'm at Metro, and I've been there since I've been at New Haven. And when I left my school in Brooklyn, it felt heartbreaking to leave. As much as I felt, okay, I'm ready to leave New York, and I did not feel ready to leave my school. And so when I came to Metro, I felt like, oh, it's home. And my teaching has grown so much because of what I had learned at Metro and from my colleagues. And so, yeah, I have been there since. This is like how small New Haven is. The way I originally kind of fell into Metro, so when we decided to move to New Haven, and there, in the same way that you just said, there are schools that didn't exist when I was growing up as well. And so I was kind of looking at the website and seeing, all right, what's around here now? And I looked at New Haven Academy, which didn't exist when I was growing up. And it looked very aligned to, social
I'm a founding member of that school.
Say again?
I am a founding member of that
Yes,
school.
I did not know that.
I am. Meredith and her husband Greg. Yes, that's part of the founding of that school.
Oh, I love that. I want to talk more about it.
My son is there.
Okay. So I was like, well, this is the kind of school that I want to work at. And so I think I just cold emailed Greg, to be honest, and he was very kind and had a meeting with me. And he was like, look, I don't have any social studies positions. It's like, we don't have a lot of turnover. And he was like, but let me give you the landscape of schools doing a lot, similar good work. And he mentioned Metro, and I said, the Business Academy? I didn't even think to look at it because of the name. He was like, no, believe me. So I thought, okay. And I had it in my head, but I hadn't really taken any actions. And then my mom ran into Judy Puglisi, who was the principal at the time when I started at Metro, who was also a West Hills parent. So I've known her, we go way, way back. And so my mom ran into Judy here's a very New Haven thing, at Edge of the Woods.
Doesn't everyone run into everyone?
And they were chit-chatting and catching up, excuse me. And my mom said, oh yeah, Julia's they're thinking about moving back to New Haven. And oh yeah, she's a social studies teacher. And Judy said, she's a social studies teacher. I need a social studies teacher. And so that's how, long story short, that's how it came
Julie,
to be.
I didn't even know people taught social studies. Is social studies still taught?
So social studies is the umbrella term, right? So within the umbrella of I have a 7th through 12th grade social studies certification. I have taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade social studies. I have taught, world history, U.S. history. I teach civics now. I teach, restorative justice law class. So it really is an umbrella term.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, that gives me, that makes my heart happy that kind of stuff is still being taught, because some of my best classes were social studies and civics and geography, because I just lived for that kind of thing. So you're at Metro, and I know some folks at Metro, Steve,
Yes.
and a couple other folks. Y'all are tight-knit, y'all are a motley crew over there.
We are. I just got a shout out
I
to
see
fellow
some
Metro
more.
teachers right here.
Raise your hand.
Together, AJ Shanu.
Oh, I see you. See, I know them. Because those bandits hang out at Possible Futures, so I see them all the time. So all right, so you're at Metro, and you've been there this whole time.
I have, and in terms of tight knit, I really was. I found my family at Metro. So mentioned Steve, and what the folks that I became closest to when I first got there, two of them don't work there anymore, but, for good reasons. One, Natalia Burbinsky, who was actually the National History Teacher of the Year a few years ago. She moved with her partner to Philly. And then Leslie Blacktoe, who's our incredible...
I love Leslie. She's another one that hangs out at Possible Future.
And so those were the first people that I got connected to, and I learned so much from them. And we started a lunch club where we would cook each other food. So one day a week we all made, batches of food and would come in, and so you only had to bring lunch once a week.
Now, do y'all get to do this because your school is Metro small?
It is
and
small.
Intimate?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so we now just call it, we still have a text chain or whatever, we call it the lunch club. And so, that's the kind of place it is. But no, it is a small school, and it's interesting. And I have incredible colleagues at Cross who have incredible relationships with each other and their students. But I think from my own experience in high school, going to this very big school, and then having been at a smaller magnet school in my K-8 experience, the schools that I have been drawn to teaching have been these smaller communities. The one in Brooklyn I taught at was quite small. We fit on one floor, and Metro is very small. And there's something really beautiful about everybody knows everybody, and that matters, especially for kids.
I agree. So, tell me, how do you teach with this political climate? How do you teach with the curtailing of teachers' movements around what they cannot teach?
Yeah.
And even though we don't have any banned books here, but there's still people here in the state who are looking to have books banned. I want people to understand that there are people working to ban books in the state. But Connecticut is not all so liberal and people were so, God or Black Power. No. There are people in this state who are every day working to try to ban books out of schools. How do you as a teacher and your colleagues work under the threat of what is happening in other places?
Yeah.
How do you maintain the level of excellence that you do when your wings might be clipped or clipped a little bit to sort of be in line and in tune with national standards, national rules, and how do y'all manage that? How do you manage that?
Well, one of the things I do is teach about it. So, truly, my second day lesson in my civics class is teaching about the book bans and restrictions that is happening around the country. And we talk about how classrooms are sites of debate and what history gets told and what history doesn't get told and who should get to decide. And so, I expose my students to that and ask them to be part of that conversation. So rather than shying away from it, and I know that there are some places where you can't say critical race theory. It's a dirty word, but in that very lesson on the second day of school, I explain what it means, and then we talk about why are people scared of that, or what's the underlying, is there another unspoken reason behind that? And so I think that having our students be critical thinkers and consumers of what is happening that's one of my approaches.
Talk to me about the allocation of resources for education.
Yeah.
Because I listen, we all read the papers, we all hear the news. Every time we turn around, something is being cut, and usually is cut from education budgets.
Yeah.
You don't have the same resources that you had to do that you did last year, and every year is different. How do you work in that reality? And are you coming out of your pocket? And tell us what we should do.
Yeah. I mean, it is crazy, if you look at the military budget compared to education budget, I mean, right, you can see what people's priorities are about where they put money. And, I think there's a lot of work to be done in Connecticut. So the fact that schools are funded predominantly from property taxes allows for really unequal educational resources. And in a town like New Haven, where Yale is tax exempt and owns 50% of property, that has a huge impact on us. So I know that, there's a fight right now to really advocate at the state level that we need some more support, especially with a lot of the unknowns of what's going to happen federally in the coming months. Not to get too in the weeds, but right now Connecticut has a large rainy day fund, but there's these fiscal guardrails, and so there's a lot of advocacy work being done right now to say, let's adjust those so that, and let's also, the ECS formula, we have to have that be fair and rethought, and we need to fully fund our schools, and it shouldn't matter the zip code that you're in. So I feel really lucky and grateful and proud to be part of a union that's, doing a lot of this work.
Y'all have a very powerful union. Y'all don't back down. I'm for organized labor. I stand with organized labor, because if it wasn't for organized labor, I'd probably still be doing wash at the river somewhere. So organized labor is the cornerstone of any democracy, I think.
Absolutely. And I teach that in my civics classes too, right? So I really believe that. So when I teach civics, I don't just teach about the structure of government and things like that, but I teach about unions and social movements and all of those things, because that is what democracy is. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I gotta bring up the LGBTQ community. I got a plus community, and all the transgender conversations and all this back and forth about should they be on sports teams, should they be using bathrooms, should we be concerned about pronouns and all these other kinds of things, and it just seems like that gets played out on the education level more than any other place in any other arena. And so how do you maneuver those waters? How do you wade through and figure out what is the right thing to do?
Yeah, we need to protect our kids, right? So I actually I have since passed on the baton, but I was actually a long-term GSA advisor, both at my school in Metro in Brooklyn and then at Metro. And I think that it's really important for students to have known allies in buildings, and to help educate one's peers. And we are lucky to be in a state that protects trans students and non-binary students. And, this is something that teachers complain about, but we have these things called vector training, like the mandated reporter training you do at the year, and you have to watch a lot of videos, and it's like, oh God. That said, mandated reporting is important too, but I will say I was pleased that added into the mandated training this year was about supporting LGBTQ students and what the laws are in Connecticut, and making sure that you are using students' preferred pronouns. And so I think education is important. I think standing up for our students is important, and I think there's going to be a lot more fights in these months and years to come.
I bring these up because schools and teachers are the front line of these things. There's a great many children who are homeless in New Haven proper. Yeah. There's a great many kids who are hungry in New Haven proper. And that's, before any teaching can happen, you've got to address that. Yes. You've got to deal with that. Whatever time school starts, you got to spend 20 minutes trying to assess who needs what, yes, when and how, before you can even open a textbook and get to the learning part. So talk to me about how do you plan your day? Is every day different? Do you come with the understanding of, I got to think about these things at every second of every day, and I'm knowing these kids and who's where, and who's what, who can't go home, and all of that?
Yeah, I think the foundation of education is relationships, right? So, a student can't learn from you if they don't trust you. And so part of building relationships is getting to know your students. I partnered with the Yale Education Studies program. They have a teacher partner program. So I, in the fall, had a bunch of Yale undergrads coming in just day after day, just observing my classes. And one of the students said to me, you never sat down. You were always talking to your students, and some of it was about the work we were doing, and some of it was like, hey, are you okay? What's going on? And like, writing up, we were really lucky at Metro. We have a lot of supports, and that's not just happenstance, right? That's because we dedicated resources to that, to be a trauma-informed school. So we have a turnaround room.
Talk to me about that. I'm trauma-informed.
Yeah.
Is that for, like, all teachers get this training or this understanding or an awareness?
Yeah, so sadly just as of last year, the folks who own the practice retired, and the program hasn't continued. But at the Post-Traumatic Stress Center that used to be right on Edward Street, is that right? Yes, Edwards Street. They had the Miss Kendra program. And so actually, like, I've gotten to see the benefits of that program, both at Metro at a high school level where I teach, but also my own kids, because my kids go to Edgewood, and Miss Kendra was at Edgewood too, and my kids loved it. It was really important. So the Miss Kendra program at the younger grades was, they would have a clinician who would come in and work with students, and there's the legend of Miss Kendra, and so there's these kind of trauma-informed sentences of, like, with the ACE score, like childhood adversity things that, like, a child should not have to, and then various traumas that they could have experienced. And they would give out these red beads to, like, as a sense of strength. But the kids would write letters to Miss Kendra, who's kind of this mythical person, and the clinicians would write back to them, but they could share their worries and so that was what it was at the younger level. At Metro, we have our ninth grade, all of our ninth graders take a dramatic arts class, but they partnered with the Post-Traumatic Stress Center, and so we had clinicians partnering with our drama teacher, and so they were doing, or not were, still are, doing both, like, some social justice theater work, but also, as a way to kind of check, see who needs some support, right? What's coming out in the stories that they're creating and writing. And so all of our students went through that. And so we also then had clinicians who worked at the building, and we have social work interns. So we have one school social worker. We do not have enough social workers in our buildings. It's going back to funding, right? Our students deserve so much more. And so our school social worker, so much of what she does is actually working with our students with IEPs, because in their IEPs there's maybe mandated social work, and so that fills a lot of her time. And so then there's a lot of students who have needs who don't have IEPs but still need that kind of level of emotional support. And so we have I'm going on a tangent here, but we have a social work intern program. So we have social work interns, many from Southern, but places as far as NYU and, Bridgeport.
See, I like that this isn't tangents, because I think it allows people to sort of understand that there's layers to this, and that it's not just kids just go to school, they act out, teachers don't give a damn, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. That there's layers, and that there are supportive services around so that people can understand what is going on in schools. So
thank you for saying that.
I appreciate you talking, about this in a very sort of intimate and painting a picture for people to see. And if they, people have to follow along, well, they just have to follow along, because this is what the work is.
Absolutely, yeah. And so our trauma clinicians, like, if there were, cases that were more serious or needed more support, students could see them. So unfortunately, that program ended. But we now at Metro are really lucky. We now have a school-based health clinic in our building, which I think all schools deserve. And we have a full-time behavioral health person there too, so who can also see students. So I really believe that these are essential parts of schools. And so, we are a school, but we can make referrals. We can get students the support that they need.
So I'm going to let y'all ask me 3 questions. There are 3 questions for Lori, but let me finish talking to her a little bit. Are y'all getting ready for deportations, mass deportations? Are y'all worried about that? Are you preparing And my good friend Kika Matos and Tabitha, who works for Connecticut Dreamers, everybody's gearing up because they know it's coming.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, literally on Monday, our staff meeting that every staff across the city had was about this. So I'm glad that our city is taking and our district is taking it seriously. So we had a training about what current law is, and focused on how to protect our students and families. But I mean, it's scary, right? There's also been a push to make sure we have really updated contact information, because there's fear about what if a family member is taken and then who do we contact, right? So it's scary and it's real, and I am proud to be in New Haven and have a city that is going to stand up for our young people and our families. I actually had started the year, I had someone from CT Students for a Dream come speak to my students. Now this was pre-election, so it was a different context, but I also want to expose my students to resources that exist both to support them and their families, but also that they can be part of so that they can be change agents as well. Yeah.
So let's all take a little bit of a breath. Now talk about the delight of being named Teacher of the Year, and then for 2024, and now to be Connecticut Teacher of 2025 of the Year.
Well, I would say the Connecticut one is, surreal. I was on this Zoom call last night with the other 50 state teachers, and it's also the Teacher of the Year from Guam and the U.S. Virgin Islands and American Samoa. It was really this wild experience. But one of my proudest moments was the New Haven recognition, in part too because it started with, there's something that's very New Haven called the TAPS Awards, and that's how I got in the running to become Teacher of the Year, but that's your colleagues nominate you. And so that meant so much to me because it is such a collaborative job. And so I just, I know this sounds trite, but I truly share the honor with my colleagues. But having my deep New Haven roots, I am such a proud New Haven graduate, parent, teacher. It was really a beautiful thing. And I'm excited, I will say I'm excited in terms of the platform. A couple of things, programs that I've been working on in these past couple of years. We actually had the book club that we did a while ago.
Which was, I'm still amazed by that book club.
It was something. This was James Foreman and others. I'm forgetting the other editors' names, but recently published the Dismantling Mass Incarceration, a Handbook to Change. And so rather than just having a regular book launch, they invited different community members to hold book studies, taking different components of the books and have a book group, and then come to this larger gathering and read it, which was really quite something.
Let me tell you something. I sat with these young people, and they had taken this book apart. I think we had policing or something. I think
we had the prison chapter.
Yes. And they had marked up their books, and they were asking, and these are kids, and they were asking, really great questions. I was so impressed and in awe. So when we got to the Yale Afro-Am Center, and I had to borrow their book, because I had left my book. So I had to borrow their book, and they feeded me information, because I had left my book in my notes. And they were like, this. It was... If you think that these New Haven kids are not bright and talented, you don't know New Haven kids. Because these kids and they came to the book club meeting. Yeah. They were asking real questions, and then it was impressive.
Yeah. So the
high five to y'all.
Thank you. And it was such a joy. I love my job so much, and it's for all these reasons. And getting to do things like this with my students and learn alongside them. But so the students who have participated in that are part of Steve Stasiak, you mentioned, this restorative justice program and course that we started at Metro. And another thing that I feel really honored to have helped launch here in New Haven is this Grow Your Own program to help create we have a new education and leadership pathway to help turn more New Haven students into teachers and come back to teach. And so those projects, if you will, are really important to me. So this is all on to say that it's such a huge honor to be Connecticut Teacher of the Year. I am excited because it gives me a platform, and I'm hoping to really use that platform to advocate for more restorative justice in schools, for investment in grow your own programs, and for funding our schools, which we desperately need. So I am looking at it, it's obviously an honor, but I'm also looking at it as an opportunity to try to use that advocacy piece that we talked about, that spark that started in that Brooklyn story, and be able to kind of bring it to a larger scale.
She's a pretty. I'm gonna rest easy knowing that she's in somebody's classroom teaching some children. My children are all grown, but if I had known, let me tell you something, I would all sent them over to Metro. Although they had a fine education, no shade to anybody else. Yeah. So I'm gonna take 3 questions, and then we're gonna wrap up because I don't want to. She's got a family. I don't want her to keep her out all night. Although I could keep you out all night, girl. But so if there's 3 questions, I have 3. Yes, back there. Stand up and then speak loudly.
Hi, I'm not sure if you remember me because I never took your class, but I remember when you were hired.
Oh my
gosh! So, Metro graduated 2016.
Woohoo!
Teach at Middletown High School.
I love that.
And I guess my question is, just touching on what you were saying about Metro and sort of program in terms of this very caring, close-knit community. I kind of had the opposite experience of you, where I went from this very small high school to a very large high school in Middletown. And thinking about building relationships with students and really checking in on them and making sure that they feel welcome, that they feel like they can trust you. A lot of the discourse I see around these sorts of initiatives is that it takes away the rigor and the challenge of school. And what what my question is, not that I agree with that, but I think you can, because I think that you can be considerate of students' social and emotional lives while also creating a challenging environment for them. But what are some steps that you take in your practice to create an environment that's both welcoming but also challenging, and that encourages students to not just give, the average level of effort, but to go above and beyond?
Yeah.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important, right, to have high expectations of your students. Yeah, you can do this, and if you're struggling, I'm here to support you. And at Metro, we have, you probably remember, I think this was true when you were there then too, the mastery-based grading, or maybe we were just starting that. It was kind of new-ish, maybe.
Yeah, I think it was my senior year, maybe.
Okay,
Yeah.
because when I came in, which I guess, I started in 2015, that it was I was kind of part of the work of really creating this. And so to me, mastery-based grading, it's mastery-based learning, right, is this idea of it's not just do the assignment for the grade, but it's this real idea of revision and a cycle of revision and feedback and growth. And so, if you are emerging, it's you've got some learning there, but here's where we still need to grow. Or our novice code, because we still have to code things in Power School, which is our online grading system for novices, not yet, is NY, not yet, right? You're not there yet. Exemplary, you've gone above and beyond. And so no matter where students are, we can still push them to grow. And so I think having that language really helps. But I also, I don't shy away from writing in my class. In my civics class, we end the year with a major research paper, and because I want my students to have gone through the experience, of being a historian, but also of writing something like that, so that if they choose to go to college, they have that under their belt. And I've had students come back and say, thank me for giving them that experience. And they're sometimes surprised themselves when I tell them, you're gonna write a 6 to 8 page research paper. They're like, Miss, you're crazy, but then they've done the work and they they have the evidence, and it kind of writes itself because I've scaffolded all the steps so that they can do it. And so it's not saying, well, you're struggling in this area, so I'm not going to have you write the paper. It's, I'm going to break down every step so that you understand what to do and give you feedback so that you can get there. Thank you.
Thank you. Two more questions? Anybody has a question? Mike Moran, thank you.
We were talking a little bit about experiential education before we began. First of all, thanks to both of you and to Margaret Ann and the museum for creating this space, and congratulations. One of our town's superpowers is that it's a compact place with extraordinary history that's accessible, and it's not just local history, it's great local history, but national and global history, and you're doing a lot, and folks in the MBA are doing a lot. So I wonder if you could just talk some about your practice in terms of experiential education, place-based education, and your hopes and dreams and ways that others might be able to help you and your colleagues on Water Street and throughout the system.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I'm excited. I'm literally taking my kids here with AJ, who's sitting right in the audience. We're taking all of our civic students and all of our African American Latinx history students to here New Haven Museum on Monday and Tuesday, and so I'm really excited about that. And as we were actually just talking about out in the hall there, the idea of then using that to brainstorm, activism or actions that they could take. So I'm really excited for them to see the Shining Light on Truth exhibit and talk about the 1831 HBCU. The location, well, we think, right, in that Vermont article you were just sharing with me, but as is known, it was 2 blocks away from where Metro stands. So we could literally walk to the location where this was. And so I'm excited about thinking about how could our students create some kind of historical marker or monument to that and use that as a call to action, right? So there's so much there. And I'm going to be honest with you, I think I have a lot of growth in this area. I want to do better about taking my kids out of the building because there is so much incredible life and history and work happening in the city. Even just the education class I teach, to break it apart from just history focus, tomorrow I'm taking my 10th grade education students to Conti, which actually Conti was still so kind of my alma mater, to have site visits in kindergarten through 2nd grade classes so that they can have some exposure to early childhood education. And so, right, that's really doable. We can walk 5 minutes away and they're having this really rich experience. So I think that there's a lot of ways to think about what is really accessible and very doable to expose our students, because those are also going to be the things that they remember. I actually, with the Teacher of the Year designation, I have felt really conflicted because part of it takes me out of the classroom. So there's going to be periods of time, there already have been this year, where I'm away, and that doesn't feel good or right. It feels counterintuitive, to be honest. And so I really was thinking, well, you know what? I'm going to then really double down on giving them these experiences of making these trips happen and bringing in more guest speakers and having more of this experiential learning, because I want it to matter and stay with them, if that makes sense. And it brings it more alive, right? Rather than, I think there's a lot you can do in the classroom, right? So you mentioned textbooks before. I don't use a textbook, right? No way.
I'm old as hell.
No. I think a lot of teachers do. And no shade on them, but I'm curating resources. I'm doing, interactive activities and things like that. So there's a lot of great things you can do in the classroom, but I think they're bringing students to have other experiences elsewhere and hear from other people, not just their teacher, is really powerful. And so I think that's important, and I'm excited to build on it. I think I still have growing to do there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The gentleman all the way in the back.
Yeah, congratulations on
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
well-deserved honor. My question is about, I guess, one of the hot topics in education right now is cell phones and digital devices in the classroom. And think New Haven has started to stake out a stronger position on one side of that issue. I think there are some good arguments on the other side too. What you're
Yeah.
saying about deportations and, you know, you need to notify people, I think is maybe one of the arguments on that other side. But I'm just curious about your
Yeah.
hands-on perspective on this.
Yeah, I'm conflicted. I mean, it is coming in New Haven, right? Like my daughter is in middle school, and all the middle schools, I think, in January are getting yonder pouches, and I think that's happening.
NHA is piloting, it's public now, NHA is piloting for high schools
Okay.
in February.
Okay, and so it's coming to the high schools too. Obviously, cell phone usage is a problem, right? That is true, I think, in any classroom in the United States that you go to, and there is issues with addiction that we need to talk about, and like, what is it masking, right? If a kid is scrolling on a phone, it's a way to disconnect or disassociate, right? Like, there's so much there. And so it absolutely is something that we need to address. That said, I don't think it's a net bad entirely. And so it is part of the world we live in. And I will use it to our advantage in classes. I'll give you a very specific example. This week, I did a lesson about understanding media bias and specific. This is an election unit I was doing, but looking at misinformation, disinformation, how to understand bias, reliability, and so we looked at something called like the SIFT method, which is stop, investigate.
Find source.
Thank you, find source, and trace to the originals, of course. And so I told my students, I was like, well, you're probably not used to having a teacher say this, but I said, I want you all to take out your phones, and I said, I want you to go to a social media site of your choice, so you can go to TikTok, you can go to Instagram, and I said, take 1 minute and scroll through and find like the first news story that you can find. Because I polled my students and I said, where do you get your news from? And the majority of them said social media. And so I had them all find a news story on social media, and then we did the SIFT method. So they had to see like, okay, who is the source of that? And they had to do a search to find out like who that. They went through all this stuff, and it was fascinating. And we had incredible conversations. I was only able to do that because I told them to take out their cell phones. So my point is like, I do think that I use QR codes in my classroom so that they can, access a Google form. Like, I do think there's also opportunities to use phones, but we need to find a balance, and we have to address the underlying concerns and issues as well, of course.
Thank you for that. I agree. I feel like it's a cowardly easy way to just snatch phones rather than integrating them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like integrating them in a real responsive way, so that because I just think that's the wrong way to go about that. Because I think you can help teach social media literacy when you engage in exactly the way that you did.
I will say one other just like really practical thing that I think needs to be considered. So we are really lucky at Metro that we're 1-to-1. Every student gets a laptop. But I know that my colleague at Crossway I work really closely with the education pathway work is also lead English teacher, and she was helping with like testing that they had to do, and it was on computers. And they're not 1-to-1. So they were having to use the library, which was recently reopened because of, mold and all of those things. So finally the library's open, and they were having to use it for testing because there's not enough computers. And so, like, if we're being mandated to do things that require devices and we don't have enough, like if we are going to lock up phones, then we also need to invest in resources to make sure that every kid has a laptop. So I think that's like another consideration too.
This has been a pleasure talking to you.
Oh my gosh, me too.
I'm going to sort of go out and say, I'm going to advocate for you to be the U.S. Teacher of the Year. I think you're a shining example of what I remember teachers being like. And oftentimes, teachers are the villains in a lot of these media stories. And teachers are under siege, and I have such reverence. So thank you for sitting here with me and sharing so beautifully your teacher experience. And I just admire you so thank you.
Well, I admire you too. Thank you for all that you do for New Haven, and I'm so grateful to be in community with you, truly, in all these different ways. I'll say one little thing, just because we're in a New Haven history museum. The theater company that Babs and my husband are doing work on is Broken Umbrella Theater, which they do site-specific New Haven history-based theater. So it's, it all wraps up.
It's wonderful. So
And thank you all for being here and to New Haven Museum. I'm excited to bring
thank
my
you,
students
Margaret
here.
Ann.